Hello guys and welcome back again into the lecture. Not a while ago I read somewhere that all openings that are named after the birds are dubious, suspicious openings. Well, in this lecture you're about to see the opening that is named after one of the deadliest snakes, Cobra variation. You're going to enjoy this one. I like it a lot. I applied it in my practice in the last couple of months. It works perfectly fine. Let's go. So, Cobra variation happens after e4, c5, knight f3, and when you play e6. On your question, do I have to always play e6 if I want to get a Cobra variation? No, you don't have to. You can also play knight c6, but in that case, you risk to get Russell Lima. Those who play d4, you almost by force get a Cobra variation, playing 4 knights, and when they play knight to c3, you play e6, and now your opponent has to play knight db5 in order to get a Cobra variation with bishop c5. Another way of getting and reaching this opening is after e6, d takes, knight f6, and I like this one a little bit more because it's trickier. So when you play knight f6, there is a first trick in this lecture. They can go with e5, and e5 leads to disaster. You just go queen a5 check, and you're winning the pawn on e5. They have to defend it by knight. You take it, and they will all go with bishop e2. And I just want to give you 2 more moves when you win the pawn on e5, because it happens to me. Somehow I realized that they give a certain amount of compensation if I don't know how to develop myself or complete my development here. The most flexible idea I would suggest you here is a typical Taimanov or Ken opening idea. It's e6 and a6. Reminds me on Hedgehog type of positions, they can't move their knights on f5, d5, b5, and when they play castle, because they're willing to go with some rook e1 or f4 or rook e1 bishop f3, chasing that queen away on like that stands a little bit exposed in the center. You just go with queen c7, bring your queen back on c7. It's controlling everything. You're clearly up a pawn and you're so much better. So they go knight c3, you go knight c6, and before we go into the pure Cobra variation and into the main lines, I just want to show you before that. I've noticed not only my son, but my lower rated students and those who are, for example, unfamiliar with the theory. It even happened to me. I played against one journalist from my city, and we all learned that we should be treating all the Sicilians in typical English attack fashion, where you play bishop e3, queen d2, and f3. But first you play f3, and then you play bishop e3, and so on. In this variation, it doesn't work. And it's bishop e3 by online databases is one of the most common move. Not one of the, it's the most common move by white against this position. It's absolutely bad, and it's bad by force. So after bishop e4, now they threaten to take the pawn on e4. You simply have to defend it. You can't play queen d2 because knight e4 wins the pawn and wins the knight, or a queen if you take. And if they play f3, you immediately go with d5, break it like this. I fell for this when I was younger. I noticed that my son the other day fell for something like this when he was white. And I noticed that most of my students fell for this kind of a trick in the past. And I just want to tell you and repeat it once again. After these 4 nights opening, most common in practice in online blitz and bullet practice is this move, bishop e3. So it's bad. Remember, if it's not bad, it's at least suspicious. Another line that I just have to mention here is if they take on c6, you take with b pawn. Why with b pawn? Because you would like to play d5 and to go towards the center and to simply build up a strong game in the center for black. So when they play bishop d3, d5, now I just have to do like a specific lesson on positions like this, because it's not easy to explain you what are you supposed to do right now. But at least you know you're controlling the center, your game is good, and black should be fine here. And let's go into the knight db5, because it's the main move. Most of these guys will play knight db5. They just want to jump with the knight on d6, and they just want to take advantage of the weak square d6. And until like 20 years ago, almost an autopilot, everyone went for d6 here. Well, that's not a case anymore. Nowadays, one of the most dangerous variations by black here is bishop c5, which is called Cobra variation. But I just want to tell you another story. I played like, I believe it was 30 years ago, and I played against one arbiter. At that time I was 14 or 15, and we just played a game, and I was white. I played knight db5, and the guy played bishop c5. He was a correspondence player. He knew for this move. Brenza is his name, and I'd never heard of him up to that moment. I've never seen this opening up to that moment, and I just said, oh, poor guy, he played bishop c5. He doesn't even realize how dangerous he is when I jump with the knight on d6. I lost that game very convincingly with white pieces, and most of the tricks that I'm going to, or simply I'm about to present you in this lecture, actually happen in that game as well. So after bishop c5, I jump with the knight on d6. Nowadays, there are two actually, I would say, deviations, or there are like two alternatives and possibilities for white. One is knight d6 and bishop f4. I remember last time when I played a blitz game against Grandmaster Miloš Perunovic, who's an active representative of this variation with the black pieces. I played bishop f4, and I had kind of a solid game because I knew that jumping with the knight on d6 could be dangerous. So I played bishop f4. He went for castles. I played bishop c7, and I knew this variation up to this moment. And I just knew that when I play bishop d6, my position should be fine. He captured, I recaptured by queen, and when I expected him to do something, he actually brought a queen back to d8. For me at that moment, it's not that I didn't know about this move, but simply I didn't find anything that special about this line. After I played castle, now they have two ways of playing this variation. It's a very interesting thing. One way of playing this line could be, and the main one is the one that I'm about to show you. Another one is knight e8, kicking the queen away and breaking afterwards with f5. I don't know, a6 and f5. Nothing special. White is a little bit better. Although even Perunovic played in World Championship in Rapid in Moscow, like back to 2019 against Regalov, a6. That's the best move. And after knight e4, he played knight to e7. I very much like this one. He just wants to unleash b5 and possible, like queenside action with his pawns. Get a bishop b7 and rook c8 fast. Possibilities with b4. Well, he's going to kick that queen away with knight e8. So it's a nice one. I remember playing something like bishop e2 in one of my games. b5, a3 to prevent b4 at some point once you play bishop knight e8 and kick the queen away. And now rook c8. And if you ask me, fairly nice position. Although I insist this is what might happen in lots of games that you might be playing in this opening. And I just want to show you like a nice defensive setup, and I would call it fortress for black. So when they play like g4, knight g6, kicking the knight away, queen away, queen c7, controlling f4, and knight f6. Who would say that jumping with the knight on f6 could be of such a great importance? Well, yes, this is the fortress I was talking about. So let me just explain you. If they ever play g5, you go with the knight on h5, and now you have full and great control of these two squares. And you're untouchable. They can't play f4 because you're going to take by, in this case, queen or any of these knights. But if they play h5, which looks like so logical, then you jump with the knight on f4, being supported by the queen on c7, You're untouchable. They can't push g5 because h5 would be hanging. And I just want to play afterwards e5 followed by d5 with very, very lovely type of the game. And finally, if they go with h5, knight f4 instead of this, if for example they play king b1, I once again go with this, breaking with e5 and d5. And who would say black is without any problems in this type of game? So I just showed you what to do. Let me just show you the game of Perunovic. So once again, let's go with the whole line. Bishop f4, castles, bishop c7, bishop d6. Don't panic. Do not exchange queens, because in that case definitely white would be slightly better because of backward pawn on d7. Kick the knight away. Play knight e7. That's a very important move. Do not let them take on c6 or sit and wait with that knight. Play knight e7. Unleash that action with b5. Best move according to, like database, and one of the most common ideas by white is h4. They just want to push this pawn up to h6. That's their idea. So when you play like b5, you just go h5. You have to stop simply weakening you on the dark squares. g4, bishop b7, threatening on e4. They gotta play f3 with tempo. You kick the queen away. You play b4 with tempo. Perunovic played queen a5 and played rook c8. Simply the queen on a5 was controlling a2 and was controlling g5. You always, if he plays knight b3, which I believe happened in the game, he's going to bring his queen back to c7. Black should be absolutely, absolutely fine in this one. And now you would say, hey, Maya, you were so, like positive, and it sounded like you're so excited to show us this interesting snake opening, and all of a sudden you're showing us this boring stuff. Wait, let's go. So after bishop c5, everybody goes with knight e6. Most common thing in practice. I did it as well in my game. I lost my game. I gotta be honest. I was at that time 14, 15, 16. I don't remember. And I learned my lesson. And how did I come up with inspiration? Actually, my son played a game online a few days ago, and I realized he didn't know how to trade this line. He actually played the best line, but he didn't know the line. So he played knight e6, and you play king on e7. That's what I like even more about this opening. If your opponent is faced with the Cobra variation and he's never seen anything like this, he's gonna 100% think that you're almost lost. That's what I thought when I played that game. And there we go. The best move is here played by another ex-student of mine, Grandmaster Denis Kadric, who played against Serrana in European Championship in Blitz last year. He played bishop f4. That's what I did. That's what my son did. And after e5, knight f5 check. And here I played bishop e3, which is suspicious. Which is suspicious because of bishop e4. They're threatening on e4, and they want to unleash d5 in the center. Too many pinned pieces for white. Very unstable knight on f5 if black manages to go with d5, so I kind of like black's game. And another thing, if knight f5, king f8, you just go with bishop g5. That's the best move. Simply best because you want to take on f6 and take full control of the center. After like d6, you want to take on f5, knight to e3, even though Giri played against someone bishop c4, but I believe after you take h6, bishop b4, I believe playing with two knights against two bishops is very, very unclear, because we have a weak king, we have a healthier and better pawn structure, we've got two knights in the open game, they have two amazing bishops, but they have terribly bad pawn structure, starting from the pawn on f5 and along with this c3, c2, and a2 pawns. Finally, if after d6 they just go with knight to e3, controlling the d5 and just fighting, like slowly for control of the most important central squares, you play like this. You take on e3, queen g5, queen f3, g6, king g7, and rook h to f8. This is the game between Denis Kadric and current European champion Alexei Serrana. Game absolutely looks fine for black, and I don't see any problems for black in this situation. Even though it looks so fine for black, somehow Serrano lost, and that was his only loss in that blitz competition. But okay, this is what you have to know about this one, and black is absolutely fine. And let's go with most tempting, and something that's gonna happen in most of your games. I absolutely have no doubts about that. Knight c8, rook c8. First, I have to tell you, yes, we do have a weak king in the center, but we have not only 3, but 4 pieces developed, unlike our opponent who only has the knight. Most of these guys will complete their development with bishop d3, and that's the main move. Let's see what's happening when they play very, very, I'd say, tempting bishop g5, because they just want to fight against bad king on e7 and possibly weak knight on f6 that is pinned here. You're winning, believe it or not. You play queen b6. You're now threatening on f2, and you're threatening to take on b2. When they play queen d2, all good way of sacking this bishop. Why? Because after you take on b2, he can't stop and defend both knight on c3 and rook on e1. What an easy line. If they go bishop e2, I'll show you following game, and what I'm about to show you is very typical for these positions. It's known in Timon of defense, and guys, if you're familiar with the Timon of defense and ideas there, then definitely I can give you, and I can suggest you playing this opening for black once in a while. Queen c7, castles, and h5. This is an ideal Taimanov setup for black. So everything is ready for knight g4, and I found so many games being played like this. For example, if you play g3 to stop knight g4 and to threaten some bishop f4 and to simply, you know, like lose like all these tactical threats, you go with h4, bishop f4, and you don't play e5. Jump with the knight, because knight is absolutely best blocking piece in this position. So when they go king g2, avoiding any annoying checks, rook h7, doubling these rooks, or at least h-file will be ours. Well, we absolutely have no problems with the control of the center and anything else, and that is okay. So this is the thing. Another thing, instead of g3, is what if they play, for example, h3? You have two ideas. I like queen e5, bringing the queen in the center, threatening knight takes e4. And on top of all that, it's going to give us at some point, not immediately because of some f4. So after queen to d3, you just go g5. I very much like the point of this move because you really threaten this. They won't have f4 afterwards, but more importantly, you threaten g4. You threaten g4, actually keep the bishop there on c5 as it is, and go with g4, because if h takes g4, knight g4 will be almost mate. After this, g4, and they're close to get mated. Now you really threaten this move, and when they play f4, you take. If they play bishop f3, this is a famous battery, and the king is gonna get mated. And if they take rook f3, you just have, with another famous trick, knight jumps on g4, and they're just completely lost. So, all things considered, they have to go with some bishop g5. Simply, they have to delay knight g4 as an idea. We just go with king f8, placing and putting the king into safety. Now we're threatening knight g4. And when they play like h3, you just jump with another knight, hoping for some stuff like that. If they really want to stop it at all costs, you play a6. You're untouchable. Why? I really have to say that I like black's game because I don't see any weaknesses. And the king on f8, if you ask me, is not weak. It's a good king because rook on h8 and h5 make some lethal threats along the h file, and with the knight g4, well, this queen c7, bishop c5, and knight e5, they're just doing a great job. And in the game, not while ago, played between Purkashian against Kartikeyan. Purkashian, I believe, a wife of Nakamura. G takes f6, king h1. This guy Kartikan played a6. She played f4. He played bishop e3. Played king e7. Centralizing the king was here with the idea of connecting these rooks on the back rank. Jumping with the bishop, controlling the center on e5, on g5, depending on circumstances. And after h4, Kartikan was much better. He's untouchable. And I absolutely find king safety here as one of the top priorities about Black's game. And now, when we realized all this stuff, I just need to show you the last sequence of this lecture when they play the most common move, bishop to d3. Okay, our plan doesn't differentiate, so we just go with queen c7, castles, and h5. Once again, I insist on the following 4 pieces, especially because we're threatening knight g4. And I found more than, I believe, 400 games where white players went with h3. That doesn't save them. Now bishop is not on e2, so you can jump with the knight on g4, threatening mate. So when they take, you threaten, actually they can't go g3 because of checkmate. Very lovely mating net with these 3 pieces. Take a look at that one. If they go with rook e1, which happened in all those blitz games, you play queen h2 and knight e4 because you're just covering the e2 square. King cannot go there. And when they play knight e2 to cover themselves with the knight on g1, you just jump knight on f3. Have a nice time analyzing and improving these positions. I really enjoyed this one, and this is completely winning for you. Another option is g3 that happened in my game online against Stevens. I played h4. The guy played bishop f4. You know how much I like jumping with the knight on e5. Of course, you never kick it away with pawn. The guy played king g2. I captured, and here I played knight g4. The guy probably thought that taking on g2 could be good because he was probably realized that I was a little better in that position, or a lot better. So simply exchanging the queens looked like a good idea for him, but he didn't look for intermediary moves. I came up with this double exclam brilliancy, rook h2. If he takes, I'm gonna take with g4 and I'm up a queen. So he had to play king g1. I captured, and here I was easily winning because when he defended f2, because it was obviously weak, I played rook c8 and mate was unstoppable. Afterwards, there are serious material consequences. That game was played online 2024. Finally, to see a good game of mine, huh? So bishop g5, you play king f8, and now you'll see another game of mine. For example, I found online that lots of guys play queen d2. You play knight g4, main idea. You play bishop d6, main idea. And when they play f4, a new idea of breaking these pawns and breaking on the dark squares. I very much like Black's game. I like this type of endgames. Put the king on e7, connect the rooks on the back rank, and Black is just great. Another thing, and another game was my game, played in Parachin, Blitz 2024. That's a city in Serbia. We have these Blitz tournaments twice a year in that, now we can easily say, famous open tournament. And I played knight e5. My opponent played h3. I played knight to g4. As you see, I'm threatening very nasty knight f3 followed by queen h2. So my opponent played bishop f4. Now I came up with another nasty move, g5. So if he captures, I would mate him. He realized that he played bishop g3. Another nasty h4 move. And he opted for the only move, bishop e5. I captured by knight. Played knight g6, which kind of fixes Black's game in this position. Oops, sorry. Which kind of fixes Black's game in this position. They can never play f4. I want to play, and that's what I did, queen e5. Not queen f4 because they could trade the queens off, for example, queen c1. And soon after, with queen e5, bishop d6, I won the game. And finally, those who play fairly okay, they will play bishop g5, will give up bishop for the knight, so we won't be able to play any longer knight g4 ideas. Yes, they've just deprived us from that idea and possibility, but now we have great control of the dark squares, plus we have the open g-file. After king h1, I'm showing you a game of Gadir Guseinov. played in 2023, rapid game. If bishop e2, control of the dark squares with the same ideas as in my game, h4, queen e5, bishop d6, for example. This guy played f4, knight g4, threatening to win an exchange. And after queen f3, a6, getting full flexibility, rook g8, queen b6, controlling, for example, f2 and b2. And after knight g3, played knight to e3, knight h5, won an exchange. I tried to realize why didn't he, for example, play rook f2 to defend g2? Because after h4, this, f5, e takes, this one would leave the knight on h5 loose and without any prosperity. All things considered, when this guy played knight h5, Gusenov captured on f1 and eventually won the game. I hope that you like this pretty short lecture, that you like the idea about the Cobra opening, and once again, remember, even if those openings who are named after birds considered to be suspicious, well, snake openings such as Cobra one are definitely the worthy one to try in your practice, even in tournament games. Good luck.